All right, we are doing a hot and fast brisket today, and we're also going to do burnt ends with it. So if you notice here, I have way more wood than you would normally have, and the reason is because in a hot and fast brisket, essentially this thing's probably going to cook in about 4 hours, and only 2 of those hours will it be getting smoke. So I want it to get as much smoke as possible, as early as possible, so that when we wrap it and put it back on, it'll have a nice bark and it absorbs a good amount of smoke. So I put more wood than I need to. There's actually some under the coals, I have some on top of the coals. Our target temp here is about 350. Could be anywhere between 350 and 400, will be okay. So I'm gonna go ahead, let this get started. We're looking for that good blue smoke. So once the white, thick campfire type smoke goes away, we should be good. So right now what I'm gonna do, this usually takes about half an hour to get my fire going. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna season the brisket. I already trimmed it, I'm not gonna waste your time with that. So now we're gonna season it, we'll let it sit, let that seasoning adhere, and that's about a 30-minute process anyway. So hopefully we'll season, we'll let it sit, then this fire will be ready to go, and we'll put it on. Okay, so I've already trimmed this brisket, and we're going to do hot and fast, which means we're going to cook it, instead of at 225 for 12 hours, we're going to cook it at between 350 and 400 for probably 4 hours, maybe 5. We'll see what happens. But what I've also done, so I've trimmed it. I'm not an expert trimmer. There's a million videos out there teaching you how to trim, but very quickly, what you want to do is you want to give everything a new edge, because when you buy it, some of the edges will be gray, some of them will be a little jagged. So you give everything a new edge, you try to shape it nicely, and then you want to cut out all that very hard, thick fat that isn't going to render. It's just going to be chewy and disgusting. What I've done is, not only did I cut that fat out, but I have separated. So I sliced it, this came like this with a bunch of thick fat. I've cut that fat out and I've pulled the flat away from the point. So a brisket is 2 different muscles with a bunch of fat in between, and those muscles sit like this, one on top of the other, and they're offset. So that's what we're looking at here. Why I've done this, the reason I did this is because once this is done being cooked, I'm actually going to cut this off, and we're going to chop it up, and we're going to turn this into burnt ends. So I want to get as many burnt ends as possible, and I want to season all of it. So I've cut out all of this hard, thick, nasty fat. I've separated the meat, and we're going to season this whole thing. Once it's done being cooked, this gets cut off. It goes back on the smoker, where this will be wrapped in foil and resting. So obviously on every brisket there's the sort of meat side, and then there's the fat cap. I've probably over trimmed my fat cap, but you know, this one was very thick. There was a ton of fat that doesn't render, so you want to keep some of it there to protect the meat, add some juiciness, but you don't want all of it. So they say about a 1/4 inch thickness. This was a little weird. Some places were super thick, some were thin, so I tried to even out as much as possible. But so what we're going to do now is we are going to season this. So we're going to rub some yellow mustard on it, and I'm seasoning with Meat Church Holy Cow and Meat Church Holy Gospel. So let's go ahead and get this seasoned. Then we're just going to let it sit for half an hour. We're going to let that seasoning adhere. Hopefully our grill will be up to temp by then. And once our grill's up to temp, we'll get this on. Okay, so we have this seasoned. It's pretty well seasoned. You see we coat the hell out of it. I did first layer Holy Cow, second layer Holy Gospel. That's a great combination, right from Meat Church. And if you notice, we got every single side. We got under the flap. So we're good to go season wise. I'm gonna let this sit for a half an hour. My fire's basically up to temp, but we're gonna let it settle in to make sure it's not still rising. One thing I forgot to mention, I don't know if you can see this, is so when you slice a brisket, so this is, as I mentioned, this is 2 different muscles. when you slice a brisket, you want to slice against the grain. And the flat here, the grain actually goes this way, and the point, it goes a different way. So you can't just go across the board because you won't go against the grain. So what I've done is, and you see we can't see the grain because of all the seasoning. So I've sliced a corner of this off, just a small little chunk of corner, so that when this is done and cooked, I know that that's how I want to slice it, because that's against the grain. So we'll go ahead, we'll let this sit. I'm going to put my heat deflectors on in the grill. Once we're at a stable 350 or 375, something like that, this is going to go right on there. Okay, our temp is stable. I don't know if you see the smoke, but this is thin blue smoke, not that thick white campfire bellowy smoke. So we'll go ahead and get this brisket on. We're at 350. If it gets a little hotter, it gets a little hotter, no problem. A lot of people actually do this at 400. I'm not comfortable with that hot. If you see here, we have the Weber rib rack. This is because our brisket is too big to fit. So we're just gonna go ahead, drape it over the rib rack, and now all of a sudden it fits. So as this cooks, it'll shrink, and then we can take the rack out. But for now, we'll just leave it on the rack so it can shrink. We're gonna let this go. I am not gonna touch this for another hour. In an hour, I'll spritz it. If it's small enough, we'll take it off the rack. But I'll spritz it in an hour. And then we're not looking for a temperature here. Most briskets, this is very specific temperature. You take it off and then you wrap it. We're just looking for this bark to be set. So we'll keep coming back. We'll spray every hour. I'm assuming it'll be 2 hours, but we'll see. When I can rub my finger across this bark and it doesn't come off and it's nice and crispy, that's when it's done. Once that happens, we'll wrap it, and then we'll put it back in, and that's when we're looking for an internal temperature of 205. So we'll close this up, we'll let it go. We lost some temp there, but it'll come right back up. So we'll come back in an hour and we'll spritz it. All right, it's been an hour. We still have an incredible amount of smoke going here because I added so much wood. So we're gonna open this up, we'll give it a spray and see how that bark's coming. Wow. All right, so it's not set yet, but this is coming along very nicely. Let's go ahead and spray it. And I'm spraying with just straight water. You can do apple cider vinegar, apple cider. There's a million options. I'm doing straight water because I trust the flavor, and I don't need to add anything to it. So this is coming along really, really well, actually. So we'll let it keep going. And like I said, we're not looking for a temp. We're just looking for that bark to set. It's not quite there yet, so I'm assuming another hour. So we'll check it then. All right, it's the 2 hour mark. Let's take a look. So we're looking for the bark to set, and it is not set. See it move there a little bit. So it's not set yet. Let's just go ahead and give it a spritz. Let it. And then we'll go ahead and close this and check it again. Maybe another half an hour. And I think this shrunk enough to take off that rack. So I'll probably grab some gloves, take it off the rack, off the rib rack, and put it directly on the grate. I don't need to do that, but I probably will anyway. So we'll come back in half an hour, keep checking the bark. Like I said, we're not looking for a temperature. We're just looking for that bark to be set. So once it doesn't move and it's dry and scrapes, that's when we know it's good. So let's take a look. 99% sure this bark is set, which it is. It's not coming off. You can hear it scrape. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this off. We're going to wrap it in some foil. So I'll move the camera, and we're going to wrap it nice and tight, and then we'll get it back on. Okay, so we've got our brisket here. You can see that crust has formed really, really nicely. So this is ready to be wrapped now. In a normal brisket, meaning a non-hot and fast, right, when you're cooking at 225 for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours, I wrap in butcher paper. And the reason I wrap in butcher paper is, I feel like it's a little more breathable and you get a little bit of a better crust. And, I don't know if there's any science behind that, but that's my opinion and the opinion of many others. But because this is a hot and fast brisket, I'm gonna wrap in tin foil, and I'm gonna wrap it very, very tightly. And we're gonna do that because it needs to continue to cook. It's not nearly done yet. The temperature is very high, so we want to protect it. We want it to cook on the inside, and I don't want any moisture to build up, and I don't want it to steam necessarily, because we will ruin this really nice bark. So I'm gonna wrap it really tight, and then we'll put it in a pan and we'll throw it back on. Okay. So we've got this wrapped nice and tight. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna insert the meter probe, because what we're looking for is an internal temperature of 205. So I'm just gonna shove it right through. Nice and deep. Okay. So we should be all set. We'll go ahead and put it in the pan, and we'll get it back on the smoker. And now we're not gonna touch it again. So we're gonna get it back on there. I only have the pan because it's easier to remove. We're gonna get it back on there, and we're not gonna touch it. When I get the alert that this is 205 is when we're gonna take it off. Okay, so we got the alert from the meter saying that we hit 205. I probed it after I got the alert, and it was not as tender as we want it to be. So when it comes to brisket, it's less about the exact temperature and more about the tenderness. So I've been probing it with my my instant read, and it just goes right in and out. So super, you know, nice and tender, and that's going through foil. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this out of here, and we're gonna separate the flat from the point, because we're doing our burnt ends. And we're also, then we're gonna take the flat, we're gonna wrap it back in foil, put it in, look how good this looks. Wrap it back in foil, then wrap it in a towel and put it in a cooler. So FTC foil towel cooler. And then the point, we are gonna cube it up and do our burnt ends. So let's separate this, point to the side. So we have our flat here, nice smoke ring in there. Let's get this wrapped and put in the towel in the cooler. All right, so we have our flat wrapped in foil, wrapped into the towel. We can go ahead and shove it in the cooler, and that's gonna sit an hour, 2 hours, you know, however much time you have, basically. We want it to reabsorb any juices that have come out and settle down. And now we're gonna cube up our point for our burnt ends. All right, let's cube this up. Even 1-inch cubes, and then we'll go ahead and put it in our foil pan. Okay, it's Texas heat, so my phone keeps overheating and turning off. But what I've done is I've just cubed up the meat that we separated to do the burnt ends into, and that's what you're looking at here. So they're pretty even cubes, or as even as I could make it. You see we got a beautiful smoke ring. It's really, really juicy. So we did a pretty good job. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna add more seasoning. So if you remember, we used Holy Gospel, we used some Holy Cow, and then I'm gonna add some squeeze butter, and we're gonna put some barbecue sauce. We are going to add some squeeze butter. And we are going to add some barbecue sauce. I'm going with a sweet Kansas City sauce, but obviously you go with whatever you want. Then we're just gonna mix this up. And now that we have it mixed, we're gonna put it back on the smoker. I didn't touch the temperature, so it's still at 350. And we're gonna let this run about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And this is just gonna be when that probe is just pushing right through them and they're tender as hell, and that this is all tacked up. Let's get it back on. All right, so we're on the grill. We're gonna leave it uncovered. You saw me mix everything, so we re-seasoned. We added some squeezed butter and some barbecue sauce. So we're just gonna leave it in there. We're gonna let it all tack up, and we'll let it go until that probe's going right through them. All right, these burnt ends are looking fantastic. So it's been about an hour. So I think we're all set. So we'll go ahead and just check with the meat probe. Oh yeah. Yeah, these are done. So that's just popping right in and out. They say like peanut butter or, you know, butter. The consistency, those are really tender. These are done. So I'm gonna go ahead and take these off. I'll let them cool off because they're definitely too hot to eat right now. And our brisket is still in the foil and the towel inside of the cooler. That's been resting about an hour, but we'll let that rest a little longer, and then we'll go ahead and slice it. But these are ready to eat. So we didn't record properly when we were slicing the brisket, but ultimately we did snap a few pictures, so I'll show those here and I'll talk about it. So it came out really well. We have a nice smoke ring there. It ended up being pretty juicy. The burnt ends were amazing. I would make this entire brisket again just for the burnt ends. So that was an unbelievable cook as far as I'm concerned. The brisket itself, so the flat that we didn't chop up to make burnt ends, was very good. The very end, where it thins out a little bit, was hard. We really couldn't eat that part. But once you cut off the thinner part of the end and we got to the middle, it was juicy. There was a beautiful smoke ring. The flavor was unbelievable. The bark was unbelievable. So it came out well. Just to recap the timing here, it was about 2 hours and 20 minutes to get that bark to set. Once it was set, we wrapped it and put it back on. It went from, whenever we wrapped it, I forget the temperature we put it on the grill, but it got to 205 probably in 45 minutes to an hour. So it jumped up pretty quick, which was nice. And then we wrapped it in foil towel and put it in the cooler, and it probably rested in the cooler for 2 hours. So overall, it was about a 4-hour brisket, give or take a few minutes. And then obviously you have to let it rest an hour or 2 hours. So it's called hot and fast. It's still not fast, right? It's still, at the end of the day, the whole process is 6 hours or more. But you're not managing a fire for 12 of those hours. So it came out well. I would definitely do this again. The burnt ends specifically were amazing. So if you have your own brisket, you know, you do your brisket your own way, and you know, you don't care for hot and fast or any of that stuff, at least follow the burnt end portion. Peel back the point, cut that hard fat in between, so that when it is cooked and ready to go, you can just cut the point off and cube it up and make your burnt ends. So thanks for the watch. If you could like, subscribe, comment down below. I know brisket's tricky. Everybody has an opinion on how to do it, how long to do it, where to do it, how to season it, wrap, don't wrap, paper, foil, etc. This is how I do it. This came out well. You know, if you don't have 12 hours, or if you're afraid to manage a fire for 12, which is a very intimidating thing, I highly recommend this. So thanks for the watch. And if you could like, subscribe, leave a comment, questions, I'm happy to talk to you. Thanks.